Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our is this our second or third meeting this year? Can't even keep track. 7 overall. The Q3 meeting, right? We're in Q3 for the Florida's Coral Reef Coordination Team. Really grateful to be here in Fort Lauderdale at Nova Southeastern University Almost College of Marine Sciences campus. Special thank you to the Nova Southeastern University team and Dean Holly Baumgartner in particular for hosting this opportunity for our members to not just have a great view of the port and the intracoastal here, but also to get a really lovely facilities tour earlier and learn more about the amazing work happening here at Almos regarding Florida's coral reef and all of the environmental monitoring indicators and toxicology alongside all the propagation and restoration work. So it's a really great way to start the day. Going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And again, this meeting is being televised or webcast live and recorded. And there will be opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank our Vice Chair, Eric Stabenow, for being here as well. Really appreciate your leadership, bringing everything together. And we'll recognize you for any comments you'd like to make. Eric?
Right. Well, again, fantastic facility. Really pleased that everybody came out today and over the last few days working in this same facility on issues affecting water quality related to these coral reef restoration efforts that are underway. So just some remarkable work moving forward, and also the support from the Office of Everglades Restoration Initiatives for getting us set up once again at any remote location, anytime. Great technical team, greatly appreciated, and a little bit of a thank you to Sam for the support that she's put together for the whole day here. So thank you all very much. Should we pass it to Karen?
To Alan?
To Alan?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pass it to Alan for a formal start. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Marcia's going to be pulling up just a few brief slides just to remind everyone of how to participate in this hybrid setting. We've got some members in the room, but everyone else is on virtually. So, Marcia, whenever you're ready, I'm not sure. I'm not seeing the presentation yet.
Yeah.
One moment, Alan.
I'm sorry?
1 moment.
Sure thing. And while they're working on that, just a reminder for everyone in the room, because of the owl situation, if you can speak one at a time so everyone can hear. And also, sorry, I am not seeing the slides, even though they're telling me it's up. Just to remind everyone online, members, also introduce yourselves so everyone watching online and in the room can pay attention and know who's speaking. And if anyone wants to sign up for meeting reminders, please go to EvergladesRestoration.gov. There at the bottom of every page on our website, there is a space for signing up for meeting reminders. We have a working group and science coordination group next week on Tuesday. And at the end of this meeting, as well as in our other public meetings, there's an opportunity for public comment that will be conducted using the Zoom platform's raise hand feature. So when we get to the public comment section, at that point, please raise your hand and then we will be calling on you and unmuting your microphones one by one. That is all I have for today.
Do you have the Zoom app on your?
I'm working on that right now. So we'll get there. Thank you, Aaron.
Post online.
All right. We will start with opening remarks from our members. Who would like to go first? We're not usually here in a room in a roundtable setting with this. Heather, would you like to start for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service? Or let's go to Gil first.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. So happy to be here. It's been a longer week for some of us because we had the water quality workshop here the last 2.5 days. So I'll touch on that later. Certainly, I'm impressed by the progress we made in that workshop and with this coordination team in general. When we began, we weren't quite sure what sort of involvement we would get from the various agencies on this coordination team, and happy to say that we've had enthusiastic participants across the board and good leadership from Wes and Eric. So looking forward to continued success.
No pressure today after that.
No.
All right, I can jump in. Thank you. Echoing everything that Gil said, I think that we're positioning ourselves pretty well to maybe make some forward progress. At least I hope so. The last few days have been quite productive, in my opinion. So that's great, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. I will, as a sidebar, just make a note that anybody out there in this frame, our EPA South Florida grants are still open until the 29th this month. So there is approximately $10 million worth of money there that you can do water quality related projects under. So keep an eye out for that or apply if you want. And then the last item I was going to say, I miss Joanna being here, but thanks to her specifically for getting a lot of this kicked off and off the ground. I know she was instrumental in making it happen. So special thanks for her. Thanks.
Thank you, Wade. Yeah, and luckily for her, Joanna is on vacation today also, beyond just not being here. So hope you're enjoying that, Joanna, wherever you are. Heather, do you mind if we go to you now for Fish and Wildlife Service?
Sure. I'm not exactly sure what I'm referring to.
Well, you're here as an alternate for Chris.
I am a proxy for Chris, who is currently on detail in Guam. And so I am excited to be here and to learn everything about this effort. I'm fairly new to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but my background is in mangroves and corals. So I'm excited to be able to help them.
Okay. Sounds like a lovely fit. We're grateful that you're here.
To a combination.
Chris, if you want to stay in Guam a little longer, I think we've got it covered. All right. I know CJ is unavailable today. Did CJ have an alternate by chance here? Or?
I don't believe so.
Okay. No worries. Let's go ahead to Dave Whiting online.
Good morning. Yep, Dave Whiting, Florida DEP. I tried my video, but it wasn't working. This is my first coordination team meeting. Participating in the water quality workshop definitely helped get me geared up on the challenges. So I appreciate you having me here, and I hope to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. I know you will. You were a water quality expert back at in Tallahassee at DEP, so thank you, sir. Is Alex Reed on by chance?
I am here. Alex Reed, I'm the director with DEP's Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. I will do my best to fill in for Joanna and look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome to the team. We appreciate your ability to be online. I know that you are trying to be in 2 places at once, so I appreciate all your time and the contributions you're going to bring. And then I believe Dana is not able to make it. Do we have a NOAA alternate available? Okay. Sarah, did we get to you yet? I don't think so.
I'm here.
Sarah,
and hi. Thank you, Dr. Brooks. And we online are not trying to be antisocial. The settings appear to not allow us to show our cameras. So just for knowing, we're not trying to hide. I'm Sarah Fangman, Superintendent, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. And Dr. Brooks, would it be okay to make 2 quick announcements during this time, or would you prefer I strictly introduce myself?
No, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, I just wanted to announce that today, about 37 minutes ago, NOAA released information about nearly $220 million in funding for transformational habitat restoration and coastal resilience projects across the country. This is part of bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act monies. And I mention this because the Florida and our reefs will receive some of these funds. I just dropped a link in the chat for the webpage about this announcement. You do need to click further within there to view the projects recommended for funding. And for knowing, there is funding announcements that were from the first round. This $220 million is quote unquote second round. So you need to scroll down under Caribbean. There's Florida listed, and the University of Miami and partners received up to $16 million. They'll get 7.7 in the first year to implement and scale up strategies to increase heat tolerance in restored corals. So this will benefit all of us in Florida. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. And then the second thing I wanted to quickly mention is the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary a couple of weeks ago just implemented emergency rulemaking to provide protection to deep water nurseries in light of anticipated temperature stress this year. I dropped a second link in the webinar chat to that page where you can find out information about it. It's 3 specific small areas, 1 upper, 1 lower, and 1 middle keys. The details are on that page if you're interested. These are emergency rules for 60 days with the possibility of extending for another 60 to protect corals moved into deeper waters where we are seeing temperature stress. So with that, I will conclude my introduction. Thank you, sir. And I look forward to the discussion with everyone today.
Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate you. We will move on to our non-voting members. We will start with Cassandra Armstrong from the South Florida Water Management District.
I'm Cassandra Armstrong, South Florida Management District. I'm with the Applied Sciences Bureau. And we are primarily focused on freshwater impacts to the coastal areas and including water quality. So that's where I fit on this team.
Thank you. Let's see, is Angela online?
I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Angela Delaney with Broward County. I'm part of the Marine Resources section under the Natural Resources Division. Here to participate in DEP's water quality monitoring offshore. Also we do a lot of partnerships with agencies in looking at the coral reef and disturbance response monitoring and program. I was able to fortunately attend the first 2 days of the workshop for the water quality. So it's good to get some information from that, and especially from the experts, and to echo what Wade said, Joanna's going to be definitely missed. But hopefully she's having fun on vacation.
Great. Thanks very much. I believe Deb is occupied over in Marco Island, but Caitlin is here.
I'm here, Caitlin Armstrong with Palm Beach County Environmental Resource Management. I'm sitting as Deb's alternate, as Dr. Brooks mentioned. And yeah, I manage the Reef program for the county, and we're excited to be here for all things offshore, near shore, inshore, and find out how we can partner or work together to improve things for our environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you very much, too.
Let's see, is Miami-Dade County here? Anybody from Miami-Dade online? I don't think so. Is Ian online?
I certainly am, and I am not hiding. Yeah, hi, I'm Ian Enox. I'm the lead of the coral program at NOAA's Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. Happy to be here. And apologies I can't be there in person.
No worries. Thanks for being here with us. Elizabeth Kelly, Martin County.
I'm here. Hi. My name is Elizabeth Kelly. As said, I work with the Martin County Environmental Resources Division. We recently, and I think this has been mentioned, converted from having separate programs to have just ecosystems and coastal, and now they all run together. So it's looking at water quality from the lake all the way down C-44 out to the estuary on top of the corals. So having this program happen now is very helpful as we have received grants. We're working on trying to set up a long-term water quality monitoring program, and to know what the needs might be now is very helpful. Also, we are trying to get perhaps a small coral lab started. So, we have different reefs than a lot of the rest of the reefs. So any help that we can get from this group, from partnerships, we're looking forward to that.
Great, thank you. I know Chris Kellogg is on a work cruise, I believe. So we will move on online to Shelley Kruger, representing Monroe County.
Hello, thank you. Shelley Kruger. As mentioned, I am the Monroe County representative. I'm the Florida Sea Grant agent for the University of Florida IFAS Extension located in Key West, and I co-chair the Florida's Coral Reef Resilience Program Communications team. And I hope to join in person next time. So thank you guys.
Thank you. And I believe Dr. Ralph is also not available. Do we have an Army Corps alternate?
No, one has not been assigned.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Alan. And last but certainly not least, the director of the Office of Everglades Restoration Initiatives. Adam, would you like to say anything?
Thanks. Great to meet new folks today. Always great to talk about this call initiative here, supporting the task force and providing additional guidance and interfacing with the comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. Vitally important, and seeing all kinds of connections with this. And like Eric and Wes and others have said, really super appreciative of the facility here and folks really helping us bring folks together to communicate. Really important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. Eric, did you have anything from the National Park Service that you wanted to bring up? I realized I forgot something in my intro, so I give you that opportunity.
Not at this moment, but I'll bring it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just, since the last time we met as well, I just wanted to share with everybody that obviously we had a state budget pass and get finalized. We had another record year at the state for coral reef funding. Altogether, including the Governor's Florida's Coral Reef Restoration and Recovery Initiative, there's almost $23 million that will be going towards coral reef restoration or protection directly to the reef, which is phenomenal. And then there's another $102 million for geographically focused water quality programs and seagrass restoration initiatives that may indirectly benefit water quality out on the reef and some of the other associated biota that we know is really important for coral reef health and the conditions out there that we need to recover that critical resource. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. We're really proud to be able to do that from the governor's office and the legislature and the Department of Environmental Protection and FWC. And again, that money is just part of the equation. It's the on the ground work that the practitioners, universities, counties, and cities are all doing to actually, put those resources to good use. So very exciting times, and just a very good reminder of something a lot of other folks have said, that this team really is facilitating the effective and efficient use of those resources going forward. So we are excited about that. Are we still online? Yeah.
Just get the information on
that. Okay, great. We are going to move forward to our meeting summary approvals. So we have summaries from the November 2023 and March 2024 meetings that are being presented for member approval. Hopefully everybody, all the voting members have had a chance to review those meeting summaries, and the non-voting members obviously can always contribute to correcting the record if there are any issues. If we've all done that, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes? Please raise your hand, voting members. Okay, seeing no hands raised, please note approval of the minutes for November 2023 and March 2024 by unanimous vote of those members present. And I think now we are moving on to a presentation by Maurizio Martinelli. Is Maurizio with us?
Yep. Hello,
Yes.
can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Thanks for being with us.
No problem at all. Okay, it's saying I'm going to start screen sharing, which will stop someone else's screen. I apologize.
No worries. So Maurizio, let me introduce you for everybody real quick. Maurizio is the Coral Disease Response Coordinator for Florida Sea Grant and has been working very closely with our state and federal agency partners on these issues for quite a little bit. He's really going to be talking about basically some of the forcing factors that have happened in recent years that led to the evolution of more intergovernmental cooperation, of which we are a part of. Thanks, Maurizio.
Thanks. And are y'all seeing the full screen, or are you seeing the back end?
We have your first slide up online. We are working on some issues inside the room.
It is showing notes. I think someone's asking to for the next slide notes.
Oh, I guess it is showing the next slide notes. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
There you go.
That's where you want to be.
Okay, awesome. Thanks very much. So as mentioned, my name is Maurizio Martinelli. I think my title recently changed, so I'm now the coordinator of Florida's Coral Reef Resilience Program. And as mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we transitioned from an organization that was strictly focused on stony coral tissue loss disease, but kind of seeing the benefits of that, trying to bring more things under that umbrella and expanding into what is today now this coral, this larger coral resilience program. So the presentation will cover a little bit of those background things. I'll then talk about the goals and focal areas of this new initiative, and then speak about some of the organization and operations, trying to highlight where it's most relevant to this group. I also recognize a lot of familiar faces in this room, so I apologize if this is information that you already know. So I think, as everyone on this call knows, there's been this combination of this sort of accumulated chronic stressors on the reef, as well as these acute disturbances like stony coral tissue loss disease or like coral or thermal bleaching, that has led to a pretty significant decline in the coral cover that we have in Florida. And it is the sort of long-term decline that necessitates the sort of proactive management and targeted recovery that we're trying to do with groups like the FCRCT, but also like the group that we're presently together with today. And the idea is to hopefully go from these blurry pictures on the left that show this reef decline more towards reef recovery. Historically, Florida has had a lot of successes in place-based management. So I really love this map over on the left. What it shows is the various, what I like to call management boxes that we have here in Florida. Basically, it is a way that the reef tract has been subdivided into these discrete management areas for place-based management. Now, some of the strengths of this place-based management through time have been that we were able to effectively address some of the direct impacts and point sources of pollution directly to these resources. This place-based management can facilitate more rapid decision-making because, generally speaking, you have fewer, I'd say, fewer voices at the leadership table. And again, you have a sort of discrete area that you're making decisions for. And you're able to tailor some of the conservation and management actions that you're taking to the location, to the ecosystem, to the habitats there. As you can imagine, some of the decisions you might make around the dry tortugas way out here is probably going to be a bit different than what you want up here in Martin County. And place-based management has allowed us to kind of take these actions that are more specific and more tailored to what the ecosystem looks like in different places along Florida's coral reef. But it does not come without its challenges. There are definitely issues that cross these borders. Nothing, that's on this page has stopped stony coral tissue loss disease from moving through these different management boxes. It hasn't stopped thermal bleaching from affecting multiple boxes. You have fish that are swimming up and down these. So just because we put these boxes down on paper does not mean that they actually exist out in the ecosystem. And the fact that you have these different management agencies and regulatory bodies that manage these different boxes means that there are different regulatory and just organizational operations that exist. A simple example that I like to use is that even between the state agencies and the federal agencies, we have different fiscal calendars. So things don't necessarily work perfectly in terms of how the operations are reflected in each of these boxes. And there's a little bit of a diffusion of managers and expertise, I would say. So you might have similar questions that you're asking in 4 different boxes, and it can ask a lot of managers and experts to answer that question 4 times. Whereas if you thought about it a little bit more holistically, you might be able to answer that question once and then figure out how to apply it in 4 different places. But generally speaking, I would say there has been a lot of success in this place-based management through time in Florida. There's also been a lot of success at the statewide or larger level management. So in this slide, I'm thinking about things like the stony coral tissue loss disease response or the disturbance response monitoring that goes out every summer to determine the extent and severity of thermal bleaching in Florida, or the Florida Reef Resilience Program that tried to think ahead about how we can deal with longer term resilience of this system in the face of some of those chronic stressors. So thinking about these statewide management efforts, some of their strengths include you can tackle those larger issues like the things that cross those boundaries a little bit more holistically. We can also develop and address common priorities a little bit more holistically. I think we've seen a huge benefit in basically having the wider community agree on the things that we want to be working on and then trying to come up with common solutions for them. If for no other reason than we're able to have all of those different boxes talking about the same things in the same way. I think when you have lots of different management units, it can sometimes be confusing if, say, 4 different boxes are sharing 4 different priorities, even if ultimately they're getting at the same thing. So it's a way to try to bring these kind of ideas and these strategies and these priorities all together. And in a way, it can provide this sort of one-stop shop when you have questions. So again, if someone is looking for an answer, and especially someone from, say, a decision-making or leadership perspective is looking for an answer, instead of having to go ask, say, the managers of 4 different boxes, they can potentially come to one place and try to get that answer. So again, I think it's really helpful for collating information all together and effectively sharing that information. But just like place-based management, it's not without its challenges. These are generally speaking processes that are not necessarily mandated towards everyone, but especially outside of government. And so it requires buy-in. I mean, these are volunteer efforts, and so you need to make sure that it continues to be a useful thing, but also that it can sort of fit within the capacity that exists so that folks are actually participating, because these efforts are only as strong as the participants that participate in it. You also have to balance a lot of various interests, needs, and operations of different organizations and agencies. Not that this doesn't exist in place-based management, but sometimes it feels like when you're bringing folks from a very, very wide geographic range who do a whole lot of different things, that there are a lot of different, and organizations that just function differently. There's a lot that you have to balance. There's a lot of nuance that goes into getting everyone, again, to buy into these processes. And this requires its own capacity and resources to keep things going. I always say that information sharing just doesn't happen naturally. We have to put a lot of effort towards it. And so a lot of capacity and resources are required just to keep these sort of processes going. But as things started to sort of, I would say, tone down a little bit with SDTLD, as other priorities started to come more to the forefront, we had a kind of moment where we wanted to figure out how to build on the great successes of the SDTLD response, but start to better integrate some of the other needs that we have in coral reef conservation and management throughout the state. So we thought, okay, how can we take the, on the ground, really action-oriented SDTLD framework, but start to bring in some of the considerations of the longer-term chronic stressors for things, like warming oceans, water quality issues, ocean acidification, things like that. And so the idea was to merge the SDTLD response with that Florida Reef Resilience Program into the slightly changed name of Florida's Coral Reef Resilience Program. Again, the idea here is to try to take some of the great on-the-ground, action-oriented work of the SDTLD response with some of that longer-term thinking of a group like the Florida Reef Resilience Program, and see if we can tackle a lot more of these issues under a single umbrella. And so the basic goal that we have of Florida's Coral Reef Resilience Program is to facilitate the recovery of Florida's coral reef into a resilient and self-sustaining ecosystem. I like to summarize this as basically saying that we're trying to put Mother Nature back in the driver's seat. Human action has done a lot, I think, to lead to the declines in coral reefs. And so the hope is that human action can help reverse the trajectory, but we're never going to be able to do it quite as well as the ecosystem itself can. So we're really focusing on trying to get it back to this self-sustaining piece. The way that we're trying to do this is to address 4 focal areas. So the first one is disturbance response, and this is really that spirit of the SCTLD response. So this is to maintain a network for the fast mobilization of both personnel and resources in response to both emerging and existing disturbances. We also have the ecosystem restoration focal area, where we're trying to think of restoration beyond just like putting out corals, but recognizing that the coral reef ecosystem is extremely dynamic. There's lots of different components that are required to have the ecosystem function as a whole. And so really to think about how can we undertake restoration in a way that addresses the really complicated nature of this ecosystem, that really helps think about those ecosystem services. The one probably most relevant to this group is our water quality focal area that's intended to help support some of the statewide efforts to better understand, but also to better improve water quality along Florida's coral reef. And I would also argue the water quality that eventually impacts Florida's coral reef. And the last area is climate adaptation. So finding ways that Florida can support innovation around both research, but also strategies to intervene on the climate stressors that we across the world are facing with coral reefs. So how are we doing this? Well, we borrowed from the structure that worked really, really well with SCTLD, but we changed it a little bit. So instead of having a lot of boxes, we have this nice little color wheel in the middle. But the basic components that we have is we have these 2 leadership bodies, the executive coordination team and the steering committee. These are both made up of representatives from our 4 lead agencies. So we have 2 representatives each from DEP and NOAA, and then 1 representative each from FWC and National Park Service that operate kind of on each of these teams. The way that I describe these differences basically is if this is all a ship, the executive coordination team is helping to guide that ship. They help with our overall goals. They help with the priorities that we have. They help identify the resources and capacity to do all this work. Whereas the steering committee helps with more of the day-to-day operations. They help with technical issues. Things like that. So it's these 2 levels of leadership body that collaborate to give us both overall direction, but also help with the technical aspects of all of the work we want to be doing. We then have a lot of coordination support for the FCRRP. So my role is to help coordinate this whole thing, but we also have coordination support for coral rescue specifically, propagation specifically, and research specifically. Research, we used to have a bit more coordination support, and now it's a little bit reduced, but we're hoping to bring that back up because research is such a big piece of all of this. I also wanted to highlight the box on the left. This says the communication venue. We call it the Disturbance Advisory Committee, or DAC. This is just a general communication platform where anyone who's involved with FCRRP can come and either share information or hear information. This can be about the conditions that we're seeing out on Florida's coral reef, recent research, processes that we have going on, funding opportunities, really anything that's of relevance to the group. I would argue this was extremely important to the SCTLD response because we were able to share information extremely rapidly. And so we're keeping it alive and keeping it going, both for disturbances and longer term issues. And then the meat and potatoes of all this are the teams, and I'll get more into those in just a moment, but I do want to highlight that we have participants from over 80 partner organizations, not just in Florida, not just in the United States, but globally. And it includes participants from local, state, and federal government in different aspects. So what does this look like when we zoom in? Well, we have 10 different teams, each of which are focused on a different topic area. I won't belabor what each of them do. I think the names are intended to be a little bit self-explanatory. So as you can imagine, like the research team coordinates on research. That's the idea here, but they each have a specific topic area. To confuse things, you might recall we also have those 4 focal areas, which were disturbance response, ecosystem restoration, water quality, and climate adaptation. In some cases, these teams are focusing on a single focal area, like the water quality team is primarily going to be focused on water quality focal area, and the restoration team will primarily be focused on the ecosystem restoration focal area. However, some of the teams might address all of them, like the work that's done regardless of focal area will have regulatory implications, They likely are going to be developing data sets that we want to be, managing, understanding, drawing information from. So some of these might address all of the focal areas simultaneously. And then there are some that are going to fall in between, either because the ask is too big, like we could never ask a single team to facilitate research on all 4 of these huge topic areas. And rescue and propagation, their mission is a little bit more focused, so they likely are not going to be touching water quality too much. Now, the idea of putting these in a color wheel as opposed to individual boxes is because we really want these teams to be collaborating with each other and recognizing that the issues that we have are interdisciplinary. So likely the responses or things that we do in response to those issues should also be interdisciplinary. So for example, we want to be conducting R&D on novel intervention approaches for various disturbances like thermal bleaching. And we imagine in order to do that, we're going to need to draw expertise, not just from the research and intervention folks, but also from our regulatory partners to make sure that everything we're doing is above board. Now, when we think about the water quality team, you may have heard about this team already. I wasn't sure, so I just included some quick words on that. The basic purpose of this team is to be generating action towards regional and already agreed upon water quality priorities through things like technical discussion and process development. From the beginning, the idea was for this team to work closely with you all so that we can better understand the linkages between Everglades water quality and water quality improvement projects and the downstream coral health impacts of those. And so the workshop that I think we heard a little bit about and probably going to hear more about is directly aligned with what we're trying to do with the collaboration between the FCRRP and you all. And again, when we think about these cross-cutting issues, the hope is that the water quality team won't be doing this alone, but can draw on the expertise of the folks who are on the research team or the surveillance team or working in data management, again, so that we can draw on as much expertise across this color wheel as is possible. And the last thing that I want to highlight is that I know that we can't tackle all the world of coral conservation with just the FCRRP. And so the idea is to have this resilience program engage with all the other ongoing processes and initiatives that have their own purviews and that are already really successful. Now, I promise I've had the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force in here from day one. I didn't just add it for this presentation, but I wanted to start to show you that the intention is for the FCRP to be engaging with you all in the same way that we want to be engaging with groups like the Coral Restoration Consortium and other ongoing processes and initiatives. So that's what I have for you. I'm happy to take any questions if there's time. Otherwise, my email's up here, and you can always reach out if you have any questions, want to get involved, or anything like that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mauricio. Appreciate the historical background on that and the great work that you and your teams are doing. I want to open it up to questions in the room first. Anybody in the room?
Sorry too, it's Eric. I don't know if you can see me online right now. We're having a little bit of AV problems inside the room. That is a fantastic presentation and greatly appreciated. I'd like the color wheel approach to explaining how these different teams can work independently and together, and the significant nexus with water quality and the Everglades restoration problem. So right up front, really remarkable work. I don't know that I have a question right off the top for you, but I want to take a moment to say thank you on putting that effort together, and I think it's greatly appreciated.
Anybody else in the room? Anybody online? Please go ahead and use the raise your hand feature if you have a comment or question. Sarah, please.
Not a question, just a comment. Again, thank you, Mauricio, for the excellent presentation. And I have the privilege of working with Mauricio in this context. And I just want to acknowledge and compliment his role in keeping all of this moving forward. Without Mauricio, I'm not sure we would be as effective. We certainly wouldn't be as coordinated. So just want to acknowledge how much he contributes or leads all of us and makes so much happen through this body. So thank you, Mauricio.
Great. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Gil, please.
Hey, Mauricio, it's Gil. Thanks again for the presentation. And, to kind of expand on what Eric and Sarah said, you'll notice that there's a group called the ECT, or Executive Coordination Team, that Mauricio mentioned. And really, this was really a voluntary coordination group that we put together in response to stony coral tissue loss disease. And we quickly realized that we had all the elements in place, including a fabulous facilitator in Mauricio, to leverage that coordination team to take on all things coral. So we realized that the coordination that was necessary to respond to the disease also brought up a number of issues that are broader in nature and overlap with many of our organization's missions. So we've now transitioned from strictly a disease coordination group to a larger, really everything corals group. And the coordination team that you all sit on is an expansion of that, formal expansion, actually, because we've been pretty informal up to now. And just the fact that we were able to pull all these agencies together without any documents being signed or any MOUs being in place, and it worked as well as it did, actually amazed us when we started to sit down and think about it. But I think that's what's special about corals and Florida's coral reef and the people who work on them. They're very dedicated and very willing to be open and collaborative about their work and the collective work we all do together. So I'm jumping on the Mauricio praise train, which is pretty crowded at times, but Mauricio does a great job of giving these overview presentations. And I know he was moving kind of fast, so I'm sure that he'd be happy to talk with you if you have any specific questions about any of those acronyms or history of the group and priorities, and especially tying the acronyms together. So thanks, Mauricio, very much.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it all.
Just one call back to you, Mauricio. It's Eric again. I was, not to put you on the spot too hard, but there were some situations, such as in communications, I was thinking of, where having this centralized team come together was, remarkably beneficial for all of us. And I guess I am putting you on the spot to see if you can recall a storyline of one of those cases for us where we had to deal with public communication aspect on one of the activities we're doing, and we needed to get ourselves aligned across groups. And I think we largely did that through communications through you.
Maybe a little. No. I think there have been several examples of that. Some that are specific with these leadership bodies that you see in this red box right here. Others that kind of happen more down at the team level. I would say it's when some of the times that we've been most effective is when we're trying to align, what can be considered talking points, but oftentimes are more like our priorities, and we're writing down the things that are swirling around in all of our heads. Because again, I think it can be really effective for leadership and decision makers that, at least for me, are way above my head, to be hearing the same sorts of things from different agencies, because it really does lend credence to the idea that we are working on this together, that we have a more, holistic and agreed upon approach to all of this. And I think it just really helps kind of streamline the communication. It helps to zero in on what are the most important things to be communicating with a situation like coral reefs that I'm sure is very similar to the Everglades. You can write a book on all of the issues that are out there and a second book on all of the solutions that you might have to implement them, but that's not always the most effective way to communicate these things. And so finding the agreed upon priorities, the agreed upon needs that we have, I think is one of the strengths that we have, and one of the things that I would like to continue to do with the FCRRP.
All right, I really appreciate hearing that. And I was thinking from the FCRCT point of view that ability to pull together, kind of clean, prioritized lists and bring it down from the books to the talking points to the messaging that we need to share with the Everglades Restoration Program is really kind of a critical aspect of this coordination that we're trying to do here. And so just like to keep that door open with you so we can, continue to build on successes and learn how to communicate well on the issues that are most important for us. Particularly those things that'll be in the long-term vision will be the way we put emphasis on the right priorities to make successes in the restoration program, being in the coral world, that is, in conjunction with what we're doing upstream in the Everglades restoration world. So really working on that communication across that line. So I thank you again, and I yield back to you, Wes.
Thank you very much for your time, Mauricio, and all of your hard work. So I'm sure we'll have you back before too long.
Thanks all.
All right, so we have solved some of the challenges in the room, but you know, it sounds like some of our virtual members really want to be on camera. So we are going to reset the system. That's going to require everybody to log back in. So just be prepared for that. We're going to take, I don't know, let's call it a 10-minute break, give everybody in here a chance to use the restroom. And we will come back promptly at, let's say 2:20, so 7 minutes. All right, we're gonna come back into session. Thank you all very much for turning it around. Thank you to our IT team for pulling this all together. I know it's tough at a remote location, so I appreciate you all very much. I'm gonna turn it over to our esteemed Vice Chair, Eric.
All right, so the next topic on is the water quality workshop update. There is a remarkable effort over the last couple of days to put together a water quality workshop that really was for the greater benefit of the Florida Coral Reef Coordination team here. So Gil has offered to give us a quick summary on the summary of the last couple of days, and then we'll open up for discussion after.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So summary of the summary. Keep in mind that what we attempted to do was to pull together probably about 18 or 20 technical and scientific experts to have a workshop on creating a monitoring framework for water quality and corals that would fulfill part of this group's reason for being, creating that unified monitoring framework. And if you're thinking that would never work, you would have been right had we not had the fantastic facilitation support of Samantha Cook, Kylie Morgan, if I'm getting it right, and Lara, help me with your last name. Bracci. Now it doesn't look like that when it's written down. But these three women walked us through a very complex agenda with folks in the room and folks online, and some really highly technical topics in a masterful way. So again, we just wrapped up about this time yesterday. So we don't have a detailed report for you yet, but I know Sam and her team will have that done before we know it. And there's a lot of great stuff in there. So I'm going to walk through sort of how they led us through this and some of the things we ultimately got to as a group. So the goal of the meeting was to collate information and generate recommendations for this group primarily to create a unified water quality monitoring framework along Florida's coral reef. And there are really three main components of the workshop. One was to identify and prioritize what parameters should be sampled. This is both traditional water quality parameters that a lot of us are familiar with and coral specific parameters. And then identify where and how sampling should occur, which is a big question. It relates to technical feasibility and cost, and of course, a number of other things. And then have a conversation that's forward looking on what tools, equipment, or methods are not available now, and what's on the technological horizon that would allow us to do things either cheaper or more frequently or in more places. So we walk through all of that, and the detailed report of the workshop will go into what the group concluded on each of those elements. But just very quickly, on the identify and prioritize what parameters should be sampled, the group came up with a list of 25 priority parameters. 18 of those were traditional water quality parameters, and 7 of them were more specific to benthic monitoring or coral reef monitoring. Now, the facilitation team created a process where those 25 parameters were ranked by the group based on 3 factors: connection or importance to reef health, the frequency of collection, and we had continuous discrete or episodic. So think about that type of approach to each parameter. And then whether innovative technology or technological roadblocks exist and or capacity roadblocks exist to implement monitoring for that particular parameter. So if you picture a matrix of 25 parameters and all of those elements I mentioned as rows, and then all those elements I mentioned as columns, that's ultimately the data that Sam and her group will collate and report out on. So the next element, identify where and how sampling should occur. They gave us a much too small map of Florida, but we worked through it. And there was a really interesting conversation about folks' perspective on where we should monitor. We all know there are spatial and temporal components, so this was important. A couple of things that at least come to mind for me that came out of that is really focus on the parameters that make sense to monitor from a gradient from the mainland out to the reef, focusing especially on areas of inlets and passes, that direct connection out to the reef. So there was quite a bit of discussion about that. And then also making sure we understood what areas were covered well now by existing monitoring. And I think, Dave, are you going to hit on that in your presentation, the future effort there? You'll hear about that in a little bit, and try not to reinvent the wheel. And then again, as I said, that temporal component ultimately is real-time or continuous monitoring, discrete monitoring, and episodic monitoring for events that happen, whether it's bleaching or an algal bloom or anything else. So this is one where I think there will likely be a spin-off team that's created to dive into this locational information a little bit more, because we didn't, as I said, have a lot of time to really talk about that in the spatial detail that we wanted to hit. And a couple of things came up in terms of deploying, equipment out on the reef or near the reef. It can often be a permitting challenge. And that's just something to flag for now, especially if you're installing something on the bottom or on the reef. Those elements have to be considered. You can't just assume you're going to be able to get your latest, greatest piece of equipment out there as soon as you think. And then we had a very productive discussion on innovative technology, tools, and equipment. There were a number of folks at the meeting that were highly skilled in laboratory analysis and the latest sort of collection techniques that tend to integrate parameters over time, various filters and media that could be deployed that you would then retrieve and do a analysis on to find what actually is impacting the reef. So we covered a lot of ground. I think everybody that attended considered it a very useful meeting. And it's going to be a bit of a challenge to pull all this together and summarize it. But I think the way Sam and her team laid it out is ultimately going to create a report that you'll all be very interested in reading through. And it'll point out some key next steps if we're actually moving to implementing some of these recommendations, what makes sense to take on in an iterative fashion, because we're not going to go from 0 to 100 overnight. But the other thing I want to point out is if we create a monitoring framework that provides some of the needs identified for our corals, which we know are some of our most sensitive organisms, it's going to benefit the entire ecosystem. So there are a number of people here that were also at that meeting. So Wes, if it's okay with you, invite them to add anything that I may have missed.
I mean, something that I thought was kind of interesting was when we discussed the levels, the MDLs that we would need, that it's not necessarily just like where to monitor or how, but then what should we be using? The idea that what we're measuring currently for TMDLs or for SPAs or whatever is very different perhaps than what corals need, and needing to establish that or understand what that is. To me, I know there are studies that talk about some of these land-based chemicals, how they influence disease, but I think that would be interesting to see that connection. And that was certainly discussed about where we go to make that connection.
So if I could, So showing up on the last day and hearing this and listening now, talking about the summary of what we were thinking about there, a few things kind of stood out, in particular with respect to what this team is doing with coordination. So on the Greater Everglades Restoration Program, we spend a great bit of time looking at it at a system-wide level and ultimately end up with this plan that goes down to the individual projects, and then eventually projects come down to like the projects monitoring program, performance metrics, individual pumps and sites and locations. And I'm seeing in the structure of what we've been doing for, some decades on the restoration side now over on the Everglades restoration side was really paralleled kind of organically in this discussion on water quality. Right away, we started breaking down to exactly what are we sampling, to what levels, and exactly what locations. And that is down to me, that's at the individual feature inside a project level for the Everglades restoration thinking. But prior to what we're trying to do now, we wouldn't have feedback on tweaking how we do that to meet the needs for the coral community and the coral reef specifically downstream from it. So I'm thinking that there's a real opportunity here to refine the way we think of what, how those performance metrics work, where we measure, what parameters we can measure along the way. I do encourage, honest consideration. We were in the technology side and wondering how far we needed to go to push new technology. And we were on capacity discussions and we were wondering how much support we had to push new capacity, be that personnel or equipment or even the frequency of sampling events that we were doing. I think we do need to think about where is the best place to put those efforts and what gets us the most return on those investments. So I hate to be a little bit of pragmatic about it in there, but especially this early in it. But I do think it's important to start being somewhat pragmatic about it to make sure that what we land on doesn't land on something that's largely not implementable. So we should be thinking about that aspect as well along the way. So I guess I'm throwing that idea back to that team to consider while they're summarizing and building their way through this water quality information. This coordination stream does go both ways. Okay.
I guess just a quick thing to add into that response is that definitely as we're kind of collating all the information that we came out of the discussions over the 3 days or so, definitely be trying to parse through what is maybe even more implementable currently, and then maybe is like the future research efforts. I totally agree that we need to figure out what can actually be actively used, and we don't want to have everything that we come up with be something that can only be decades down the line implemented. So I think we'll definitely be looking for that distinction as we go through to make sure that we can address stuff that groups can start acting on now versus those further research or technology advancements.
That's great.
And one thing I'll add to all that, I associate myself strongly with your comments. Gail, hearing you also talking about permitting challenges, that's an opportunity for this group as well as we're evaluating those recommendations to also look at future implementation roadblocks. One of the strengths of this particular team, because of its direct tie-in to Everglades restoration and how that body is codified in federal statute and the high level importance that program has at both the federal and state levels, is the direct connection to leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And so certainly I think permitting challenges can turn into permitting opportunities if we look at this all very carefully and find ways to bring those issues to the fore ahead of time. And that's really what I love about this concept is this team is on the front end of change that's coming. One of the few times I feel like government is actually maybe getting ahead of something. So
Wes, David Whiting has his hand up.
Dave, come on in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in addition to a couple days of the where, what, how, when of sampling, following that with a discussion on what the limitations are and to effectively put this into motion, what barriers existed, and how you might go about getting past some of those barriers or minimizing some of those barriers. I thought that was also a very useful and important part of the discussion.
Heather?
Hi, Heather here. I wasn't part of the workshop, so I just had a question for people who were there. Was there much discussion regarding how quickly data that's being collected is being shared and maybe shared back to the group and how that's being done?
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but we had a fairly detailed discussion. It may have been when we were supposed to be dealing with that too small map about data sharing, because the issue of existing programs came up, and we all agreed that it was tough to get at all the data that we know is out there. And I think Dave Cohan's going to touch on that a little bit, but that's another initiative of this group. And I think DEP as well, through the coral funding at the state level, to fund that inventory and start thinking about how we create one or more ways to get at that from a centralized access point. Not necessarily everything in the same place, but an access point that knows how to get to everything. So yeah, that's a definite limitation right now.
Thank you.
Not for long. Any other comments in the room? Any other comments online? I do just want to clarify that when we're asking, we are going to be having a public comment period at the end of the meeting. So when I'm asking for comments from online contributors, that is for folks engaged on the team, just to be clear, in case there's any discrepancies. Okay, well, Gil, thank you very much for that report out. Sam, Kylie, the whole DEP team, thank you so much for pulling that together, and we look forward to working with you all on seeing how to bring that to this team in September. Yeah, I don't want to lock that down. I'm very confident. Okay, so yeah, we'll work on it. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So I just want to point out to everybody, we are actually going to move agenda item 6 into agenda item 8. So bear with us there. But we are going to move on to presentation by Dave Cohan from Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. He's going to talk a little bit about how the data aggregation project, I think that Gil was just talking about, is going. And provide a little bit of insight on CCAR. I will also say I'll take some personal responsibility. We had a little bit of issues in terms of lining up the original presentation that we had on the CCAR benthic habitat data set. A lot of transitions here and there, and we just couldn't quite line it up for today. We have the folks who would give it are actually overseas right now, so that just wasn't going to work very well for everybody. But we will get them lined up for September. But this is by no means settling. Dave is doing some great stuff, and we wanted to make sure he had the opportunity to share it with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. And this is going to be very familiar to the folks who were in the meeting this week, and pretty familiar to a lot of you folks. I presented a very similar presentation at the March meeting. But I'll be talking about our unified water quality monitoring database and how we aggregated the data and the analysis. And I'll talk a little bit about CCAR at the end, how we hope to use it, plan to use it this year. This is a very large effort funded by DEP. Thank you for the funding for now 5 years. We've got a large team of folks that are currently and in the past have contributed. Our partners include the University of South Florida in St. Pete. We also have NOAA AOML contributors, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. We've got a lot of help on this project, and it really shows because we have so many people involved. So the goal of this project has been to create a unified water quality monitoring data set across Florida's coral reef. As it's been brought up quite often it is difficult to know what's out there, and even if you know what's out there, to get access to these data. And using these data, we wanted to identify long-term trends, identify monitoring gaps, and provide a one-stop shop for data access. So throughout the first 4 years, we really focused on creating criteria for what programs we want to include, visualizing some of these trends and gaps, and continuing to add and update monitoring programs each year. And so in year 5, we want to contribute to this effort and the FCRP effort. So we're going to continue to be involved in this and help answer any questions you may have that are spatial or temporal. We're going to conduct an inventory of abiotic parameters, which is one of those coordinated action items. It's part of action item 1. And we're going to integrate with CCAR as best as we can. We're very hopeful about that for this project. So just a brief history, our group, the Center for Spatial Analysis at FWC, has been involved in mapping for a long time. One of our most popular products is a Florida Unified Reef map that took existing mapping data of Florida's coral reef and associated habitats and turned it into this unified map that has a very similar language and resolution. And this is very popular across researchers within FWC. Our coral folks use it to help inform where they do their surveys. And this is near and dear to my heart. I use this in all my chapters of my PhD. So we'll be continuing to update this as new data comes along. There are a lot of mapping initiatives that we hope to integrate into this. A few years back, there was another Florida DEP funded project looking at endocrine disrupting compounds. So these are some of those contaminants of emerging concern, hormones, and pharmaceuticals, things like that, that we just don't know a whole lot about, but there has been a lot of research for. So this was an outreach, a database and mapping project, and all of this is available online. It was finished in 2021. I'm sure there's been a lot of work since, but this kind of got the ball rolling for general water quality. And so this is the current status of our database. These sites are not necessarily unique sites. There may be sites that have shifted just slightly geographically. So this isn't a great idea of where all the sampling is, but we have about 1,700 points where we have data. Not all of these are being updated every year, especially some of the transects going offshore in the Keys have only been sampled once, but it's just an idea of the geographic extent. So this has been a big project, and we're currently in year 5. And starting in year 1, we had to really think about what data to include and what are the inclusion criteria. And that's when we began our trend analyses. And we quickly settled on the idea of focusing on nitrogen, phosphorus, and some of these water clarity metrics, these parameters, because they are being sampled generally in discrete ways with bottle grabs and discrete time periods. And this was a big data gap. There have been some efforts to bring together temperature, salinity in the past. So we wanted to fill this data gap. So we started with about 93 programs that collected water quality data in Florida. A little more than, or a little less than half of them were not on Florida's coral reef. Of the remaining, a little less than half didn't collect enough of those water quality or those parameters that we identified. A lot of those were just temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen. Many of those were not unique data sets. They were smaller pieces of larger projects that we already had included. And we wanted to focus on the actively sampling projects while including some of those historical data sets in our database. And we ended up, right now we've got 8 projects. We started out with only 5, we're up to 8 now. We added Palm Beach monitoring this past year. And so this this part of the data inclusion is something that we're going to get back to this year in year 5. We recognize that temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, and pH are measured in different ways. There are a lot of continuous data sets. They provide a lot of value, and we want to look and pull together an inventory like we have for these nutrients for those parameters. We also started working on a trend analysis. So this is a seasonal trend analysis that is used to help identify hotspots and gaps. For example, this is a map of significant trends of total nitrogen. So green, things are getting better. Orange and red, things might be getting worse. And we started with trend analyses because we weren't sure if these data were directly comparable, but we did expect that they should be showing similar trends, even if different programs use slightly different techniques. We also have been investigating how we can use satellite data, remote sensing to fill in some of these gaps. You can't sample everywhere, so can we use satellites to fill in some of these gaps? And we quickly found out that it's pretty difficult. You can see very broad trends, but the difference in scale, temporal, and spatial makes it very difficult. So the satellite has a 1 kilometer pixel, so comparing that to a bottle graph is pretty difficult, but there's a lot of value here. And we did speak about that this week at our meeting about ways that we could look at remote sensing as it continues to get better and better. But this is an example of what you can do. You can look at chlorophyll A over almost 20 years. There's been a slightly positive slope, so there's a little more chlorophyll A in general north of the Keys. So in year 2, we added additional data sets. We focused on looking at that data comparability question, compatibility, and gap analysis. So one thing that we ran into very quickly is that there were very few overlapping samples between different programs. There weren't very many places where bottle graphs were happening at the same place and at the same time. And of the few places, there really weren't any trends that showed that one lab was consistently getting higher values than another. The orange lines are kind of weird, but everything else, there really aren't any differences, and nothing was significant. But we didn't have very many places where that was the case. This was looking at AOML and FIU overlap. They had a little bit of spatial and temporal overlap. And so we suggested that, we can send identical samples to multiple labs, but that's very resource intensive. And we just settled on the idea that if the lab and methods are certified, that may be a good way to at least have some confidence that the data are somewhat compatible. But there are a lot of additional considerations from the data side of things where the data need to have the same units, same analyte names, things like that. And a lot of the programs were not reporting minimum or method detection limits or levels. And so you may need to use estimation methods. And if you don't know what that limit is, you're not going to be able to use that. And then, like I said, we weren't able to find consistent relationships between remote sense data and in situ data, but it's still useful. We also looked at a gap analysis. We were hoping that maybe we were sampling too much, but that was not the case. Some of the analytes are very heavy, and so they don't travel far. So you really have to measure more frequently and with a higher resolution. So these buffer zones that we derived statistically vary from 1.7 to 7 kilometers of overlap. And then some analytes had an inshore-offshore gradient, so you'd have to sample, you'd have to adjust your sampling in that way. We started building story maps for users to have a more narrative walk through all of this data and all the maps that we've made. These are available online for year 1 and year 2. And in year 3, we wanted to start thinking about how do we streamline the data processing and improve data access and visualization. So we focused more on some of these more guided data viewers and apps. So these, again, you can click around, you can look at the different things that you're interested in, but it does have more of a narrative component to it. And these are available online, and we've updated some of these. And then we just have general data viewers where you can explore the data, try to answer some of the questions visually. We also looked a little more closely at the gap analysis. We overlaid some of our statistical buffers with our Reef map to look at areas that may not be covered. And we also looked at which analytes are actually being measured where. So in some cases, it may make sense to switch from total phosphorus to orthophosphates to cover more area, or there are little places where we don't have as much sampling as it seems. And this map has been built out a little bit more as we've added more programs since we've made this. Now, the big thing that we've been focusing on for now the last 2 years is improving our data processing and access. So right now, we're getting all of our data manually, either emailing providers or a manual download from WIN. We're running our QA/QC scripts manually. We're updating our web maps manually. And for you all to get this data, you have to email us or DEP or go on the DEP website. So we identified CCAR as a database that would be ideal for us to integrate with. That's a statewide ecosystem assessment, CAR, something. We also looked at WIN, but WIN makes it difficult to automatically download data. So CCAR is already doing a lot of that on the back end. We're planning to integrate all the scripts that we have for QA/QC. As data enters CCAR, we can run it through our scripts and have it update automatically. We can host our web maps and some of our other tools on CCAR, and then all of that will be available to you 24/7. You don't need to email anyone. Things will be updated pretty automatically. So that's kind of what we've been working on. Here's another type of data viewer that we've developed. We've continued to improve them so you can look at temporal trends here across the state or the southern part of the state. You can look at trend analyses. But the most exciting thing we put together last year with USF put this together was a data visualization tool. So up until this point, most of the tools that we've had have been looking across a wide spatial scale and looking at trends, but you couldn't visualize what a single site looks like over time. So this is a Shiny app that was developed by USF that allows you to click on a single site and look at what the trends have been. Here, we've got orthophosphates and total phosphorus. You can see what the trends are like. There was a spike in 2018 for phosphorus and a spike in 2021 for orthophosphates at the site just off of Fort Lauderdale. And so there is some functionality now, but what I'd like for you all to do is to play around with this at some point. Whenever you've got questions, see if you can answer it with this tool. And if not, let us know so we can build that functionality in. Some folks during the meeting this week mentioned that being able to query sites that meet certain criteria would be really useful. And so we'd like to introduce that into this tool. And this is also something that right now you have to click on a link and access it, but we'd like to integrate it into CCAR. We also have several data dashboards. This is one also built by the University of South Florida that has temperature and salinity information from buoys, National Park Service buoys in Florida Bay. It has some river gauge information. You can look at satellite images and time series. And this is something that we want to use as a blueprint as we're building our inventory of temperature, salinity, pH, and dissolved oxygen. So we want to have a very functional dashboard or interactive tool that you all can use if you have questions about these large-scale processes. And so in year 5, our goals are we're going to continue contributing to this group and the water quality team, the FCRCT water quality team. So as you see these tools, as you have questions that you are interested in answering, let us know and we can make sure that our tools have the functionality, and if not, we'll build those in. We'll do that inventory and methods analysis, and integration with CCAR is really exciting for us. And we're actually going to be doing a little more science again this year. We're going to do some fine scale analysis, looking at hotspots and localized trends. I'm pretty excited about that as well. So I'm by no means an expert on CCAR, but over the last couple of years, we've met with the CCAR folks at DEP, and we've identified this as a great place to host our data and really to integrate with them. And there's a lot of functionality here. For example, I just filtered the monitoring programs list by coral reefs. I didn't say what type of monitoring, just any coral reef, any region. And it brought up the population status of elkhorn corals. It started in 2004, continues now, annual frequency. There are other projects, the cramp and sea cramp are in this. And again, this isn't hosting a lot of that data, but it is pulling it together. And they have a lot of nice maps. We do maps, and I like the maps that they have. So here's an example of continuous monitoring throughout the state. The lighter dots are in managed areas, and the darker dots are in non-state managed areas. I know they've done some work with total nitrogen or with some of the nutrients, and this includes some of the data that we already use. Some of it is in there, but this is total nitrogen throughout the state. And they have a lot of benthic data there. So here I just looked at oyster reef density and coral reef percent cover. And you can click on individual points, and it'll tell you what monitoring program, and give you some information about that and the specific sites. So we're really hoping to have an additional map that's going to have all of the functionality that I showed up until this point. You'll be able to click on the data discovery interface and look at the unified water quality map. Right now, it's just going to be the nutrient data that we have, but hopefully we'll bring in that those abiotic factors, water quality, or temperature, salinity, all that in another map as well. All of these resources are available online. I believe that this presentation is being shared. And if there's anything that I showed that you're interested in, please email me, get in touch. And yeah, any questions?
Thanks, Dave. Anybody in the room?
Yeah, so you said that there were 8 programs that met the criteria. Do you mind sharing what those programs were?
Yes, I know I went through it pretty quickly at the beginning. So these are the programs. I believe the Florida Keys nearshore sampling is a historical program, but we've got the NOAA AOML sampling. They do the Walton Smith cruises. We've got the Biscayne Bay Aquatic Reserve, Broward County, DEP, ECA, sorry. The sampling that they do in the Southeast, Durham, CERC/FIU. We've got City of Miami Beach and Palm Beach.
In Palm Beach County, right?
Yeah, Palm Beach County, okay. Yeah. And yeah, these numbers don't necessarily make sense with the number of sites. These are just the unique sites that we have that may just be different year to year because of a slight change in the GPS points or things that have been dropped or added. So this is something that we are going to be working on as well as we update our QA/QC processes to make sure that we have the unique sites and that things are overlapping correctly.
Any other comments or questions from inside the room?
This is Wade, EPA. One thing, just as a reminder, AOML, and Miami are getting further funding to do halo zone monitoring, which is going to extend those Walton Smith lines up to shore in the coming year or two. So definitely keep in touch with them. And then we discussed this earlier in the week, but the Park Service has the buoys in Florida Bay that are not part of this data set. It might be really good to connect, make sure we're getting that skill.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the next step for us is going to be bringing in the continuous monitoring and those temperature and salinity data that we don't have in yet. And I think this map will get filled out quite a bit by all of that. our vice chair is dragging his feet on that integration, it's available online, so it's on us at this point to bring it in.
Great. I don't know, Alex, if you're available right now, but something that struck me about the presentation was talking about the unified reef map. And I know you have been leading an effort through DEP at the state level to really improve our coastal mapping. Are you available? Do you want to speak on that for a second?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So in fiscal year, or I think it was fiscal year 21-22, we received $100 million from the legislature to collect bathymetric data on the continental shelf out to 200 meters depth throughout the entire state. So it's kind of the first time at the state level this has ever been attempted. We are currently working with 3 LiDAR data collection vendors who are collecting LiDAR. We started by contracting data collection from 0 to 20 meters, but each one of the vendors has been able to push the depth range on that. So we're getting out to about 30 meters or so in the Panhandle and Big Bend region, and on the East Coast, getting a little deeper than that with the LiDAR in the Keys area. And that's kind of phase 1. Phase 2 is sonar collection. And we will be going back and looking at data gaps in both our LiDAR collection or any existing data that we have decided to upcycle because it's good data that meets our quality level. So we have already awarded some sonar contracts to go in and fill in those gaps. And we're currently waiting for bids to come in for the next round of sonar awards. And we'll be pushing the data collection effort out to 200 meters depth along the entire extent of the coral reef. So that's going to be invaluable data for this group, certainly, but good for the entire state for coastal process mapping, for resilience mapping and modeling, to resource management. So we're really excited to start sharing that information when it's available. If you would like to see or track our progress, the State Geographic Information Office has an initiatives page for us just for this project. So if you can go to the State FGIO webpage and then under initiatives, go to the Florida Seafloor Mapping Initiative page, you'll be able to track the progress of the LiDAR vendors who are currently working, and eventually we'll have those sonar vendors up there as well. So we have collected preliminary data at this point, and then we'll get finalized data at the end of the LiDAR collection, as well as digital elevation models. And we will be making that data publicly available either through the State Geographic Information Office or through our federal partners as soon as it's been fully QA/QC'd and made available for our sharing. Any questions on that?
This is David. I just wanted to say that we've already been, our mouths have been watering at the data that we've seen, and we're really looking forward to integrating all that as it comes in and expanding the URM and updating it. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex, maybe you can bring this group some nice pictures the next time we're together in September, especially since it's lobster season.
Yes, the data from the Keys is just absolutely beautiful. And we have weekly meetings with Wolpert, who's the one flying in the Keys. And it's just so exciting to see the resolution, and from, relict channels and relict shoals to the clarity of the reefs themselves. It's just really going to be invaluable for you all, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions for David before we move on?
I do. This is Caitlin Armstrong with Palm Beach County. I was just going to ask, you posted a bunch of different maps and apps. I'm trying to keep up, and I know they're available online, but what's like the best one to go to for the best representation of the water quality database right now?
So the one that we usually send out is our trends analysis that that one, the year 4 trend analysis map, that has the best QA/QC because it removes a lot of those one-off sites, and it has all the data from up to 2023 and has all the programs.
Okay, and that's on the FWC website?
That is on our, I can send out the link. That's the problem that we have right now, is that we keep making new maps and updating them so they don't have a home.
Yeah, I was on the data discovery map, the CFAR one. I don't even know if that was the right route to go, but I was just trying to keep up to, like, for myself to look at these things. If you can send the link.
Yes, yeah, the links are in that PowerPoint, which I think is shared, and then I'm happy to email it out as well. Yeah, that's something that we've been struggling with, and that's why we've identified CCAR as the home for all of this data as we move into that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, David. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to head now into sort of our broader discussion on issues of the day. Next slide, please. And really, we're going to just sort of walk through sort of an updated schedule and kind of anticipated landmarks, just to be consistent every meeting. So you are here July 18th. And want to remind everybody that we are looking at 2 more virtual hybrid option meetings in September and December. So please just keep a note on your calendar for now, and we'll work to land that September day as soon as possible. Next slide. As you all are familiar with, our unified monitoring framework identified 10 coordinated actions to take. And our job now really is to start to tease those apart and develop coordinated action plans associated with each of these that will be put into the monitoring framework as well to help guide where all of our agencies, go from here. So action 1, again, was the inventory of existing water quality monitoring programs. Next slide. And so our path of action for getting the coordinated action plan done for CAP 1 involves a status update today. We got a little bit of that in the meetings that we've had, and a lot more to come there. We have a draft document that's being worked on right now for the nutrients piece. And we are also going to start working on a draft document for the other abiotic parameters piece as well. And so the plan is hopefully to get those out to review to you all as quickly as possible, start taking comments, start really connecting those to the documents that are available to present here and really dissect and hopefully move forward with adoption before the end of the year. Next slide. Similarly, action 2 involves an inventory of the existing biological and ecological monitoring programs. Next slide. And so that really ties into some of what David just got done talking about, as well as the CCAR. And so we will get that CCAR presentation on the books for September. So we understand the benthic monitoring that they are doing. We're going to be working on a draft of this coordinated action plan as well, and getting that into everybody's hands to start to look at and make appropriate changes before we bring that back, hopefully in September. Next slide. Action 3 was the doozy, and really looking at developing that list of appropriate parameters for monitoring. That really, I do think, makes up the bulk of this effort. And that's where we were very pleased to be able to partner with the FCRRT and have that workshop just over the last 3 days. They're doing the real hard work of getting everything down on paper, trying to get everybody's thoughts bringing in experts from around the state and the country in order to really, just brain dump. And thanks to Sam and crew, be putting that into some form of written product for us to be able to absorb without having necessarily to be engaged directly in the workshop. Although, I enjoyed the half a day that I was able to attend. This was helpful for me. And hopefully others have gotten there too. I did have one question for you, Sam. Was it recorded? No? Okay, just curious. And so we'll get that copy out to everybody hopefully by September, although we won't hold Sam and crew to that. We have a lot of other things going on as well. But again, questions as, what should be sampled? Where should sampling occur? What's the frequency? Thinking about, some of the topics David mentioned in terms of, are we over sampling, under sampling based on, parameter level discussions? All of that ultimately is going to fall into our lap to decide exactly what recommendations from the workshop should move forward into this plan. And again, I'll associate myself with Gil's comments before. Part of what I think is going to make this a successful effort is that we not allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. This is not a one-time done, pencils down thing, right? It's a very iterative process that we've developed here. I think that's the strength of this framework as we've kind of written it is, we'll make our way through. And as we learn more, as we see other opportunities, we can go back and revise some of these coordinated action plans to add that information in. And this team has the flexibility to be able to do that relatively simply compared to, some of the other bodies. And so that's an important flexibility, but it's also an important responsibility. And, we should use that as much as possible. Next slide. So again, the FCRRP workshop just took place in July. I'll note that originally we had planned for that to happen in September. So we are already ahead of schedule. Thanks to you all. So we'll look to get a status update as early as September and start to review those workshop products later in the year. Next slide. We're going to skip over Action 4 because we're going to spend some more time talking about that one today. And we're also going to temporarily skip over Action 5. Action 5 involves a lot of the Mari's work that was done with conceptual ecological models. And some of the discussions that folks have been having around associated with setting up the workshop, and also with the folks who set up the Mari's model, is they're in some ways kind of also dependent on understanding what the ecological indicators you're interested in are. And so we are going to have some of these chicken or the egg situations throughout this framework. And so again, just re-emphasizing the idea that, this is not necessarily a straight line path. There are going to be iterative discussions where we come back to certain things as different pieces of this move forward. But clarify that, it sounds like some level of understanding of what the ecological indicators we may want to look at are an important step forward before we get into Action 5, or at least kind of contemporaneous discussion. It still flows from some of the work that happened over the last week, though, with Action 3, right? And the kinds of benthic and ecological monitoring that are important. And so we're sort of stitching these together right now, kind of tying them together in sort of a wrapped format. So next slide. So nothing we're really going to spend time on today. But again, I just wanted everybody to have that understanding that action plans 3, 6, and 5 are all kind of tied up together right now until we get a little bit more clarity on where we can step forward. Next slide should be 5, right? With conceptual ecological models and hypothesis clusters. And the next slide will also reflect the same sorts of concepts. The other idea that had been floated around from our first meeting is, we already have this amazing resource in Mari's that's just a little dated. we have a lot more information. And so similarly to how the FCRP workshop was sponsored, this group does not exist to reinvent the wheel, right? It is here to sharpen the blade. And so it may behoove us to consider finding a way to conduct Mari's update workshop and start with the frameworks that already exist and refine that. But we can talk about that a little bit more in September as we move forward and get more information from the FCRP workshop as well. Next slide. And then finally, the last one that we're going to touch on today, opposite the remarks on action 4, we touched briefly on action 7, and this is really bringing all these previous pieces together. Some of the work that David and his team have already started to do in terms of that chart that we saw, but thinking about, you know, the difference between the existing monitoring efforts, you know, some semblance of ideal monitoring efforts, and, you know, what are those cost-effective, you know, changes, those pragmatic changes that might be available and accessible to the folks doing this work that kind of tie everything just a little bit more tightly together and make what seem like 8 very disparate monitoring efforts, or 54 disparate monitoring efforts, maybe pulling 5 or 6 more that qualify, right, for this framework, just from simple changes that don't cost a bunch of money and don't cost a bunch of effort, just from a communication standpoint, right, and a collaboration standpoint. So next slide. So we had discussed back in January that, you know, December would be the time where we kind of come back to next steps there. And again, that'll really depend on the progress we make on some of those other ones, but we want to keep that vision in the future going forward. So next slide. Any questions on that piece of it from anybody in the room or online? Comments? Okay. Sarah, yes, ma'am.
Not a question, just a compliment and appreciation for your walking us through all that and for keeping all the various pieces lined up and moving forward in such a thoughtful and effective way. I appreciate that. That's not easy. So thank you.
I wish I could say it was just for you, but it is helpful to Eric and I as well as we work through this process. But thank you. Do we have the coordinated action 4 pieces next? I think we do, right? Yes. Okay. So the big meat of what we're going to talk about today is around this action 4 piece, identifying the Everglades restoration projects, water management activities, and operational schedules that may influence nearshore water quality and or those biological and ecological characteristics of the reef system. I guess we can go ahead to the next slide. So we did discuss the next steps in March, and this was part of the homework assignment that we gave out. So in a minute, we will review the anticipated impacts watch list document that went out to everybody. We will talk about assigning, well, first of all, we'll ask to see who's doing what, where with all of these projects, if folks are already engaged in the PDD process. And then I don't know that we'll necessarily assign representatives, but the vice chair and I would definitely like to speak with you all about how we might look at spreading out the effort there and making sure that we have eyes on what's happening in the project delivery teams for the projects that we end up, you know, ratifying or adopting as part of that watch list. One thing I will also note, Sam and I spoke earlier in the week related to the workshop, and one of the questions again in the workshop is, well, where are we looking? Where are we trying to set up Sentinel sites? And so I said, hold on, because we may have some of those answers in part from where these Everglades projects are happening, and which ones we want to define as key to this to this project. So if y'all don't mind, if we could pull the Word document up, or Cat 4. And thank you to everybody who worked on this document and provided comments and refinements thus far. So again, we're really looking at, and this is also our first go round, right? With putting text on the page for a coordinated action plan. So one of the things that the sub group of folks who were working on this original draft thought was really important, was to also try to lay out how this is going to look for all of the other pieces, right, as they're appended into that monitoring framework document. So you'll see, obviously, the title there. We'll expect that to look pretty familiar going forward. And then again, because it's an iterative process, we'll have an adoption date when folks choose to move forward. And so we can replace these individual pieces as often as the group wants to within the broader document. And we'll just make sure that that's notated with a revision date that follows. Again, in the first paragraph, just sort of reorienting the reader with the purpose of this particular strategy or plan, you know, what the action item is for and how the FCRT believes that they are addressing that. And so we can scroll down to the second and third paragraphs. And all of this is subject to further comment and discussion. But essentially, you know, we looked at developing what we're calling the anticipated impacts watch list as really how this group can sort of keep track of what's going on in the broader Everglades program, and best spend our efforts, right? So we're not necessarily tracking 15 projects at any given moment, but we have some sense of what's coming down the pike, you know, at what stage of planning it may be or may not be, and we can better hone our own efforts because all of your time and energy is really valuable as well. So we want to be as efficient with that as possible too. We also want to be able to strike when the iron is hot with these other processes that are happening at higher levels as well. And we do believe that we have the blessing and the encouragement from the working group and the science coordination group in our charter to be able to help provide. We have a responsibility to provide as much information as we can to shape those projects as they come down, so that, you know, hopefully it reflects a little bit more information and importance of the Reef and how these projects get planned. So essentially, we've broken this anticipated impacts watch list up in a couple of ways. We're looking at what we're calling 3 modes of impact within the nearshore coastal waters. And so that would include changes to combined quantity, quality, timing, and deliveries of fresh water to the coast. We're looking at impacts to local or regional water quality along the coast, and we're looking at any potential modification of the biological and ecological characteristics of the reef and associated resources. I'm going to stop now and allow anybody who wants to comment on those modes of impact. And if there are any other thoughts, comments, concerns, questions associated with those in the room or online. Just remember, I take silence as everybody loves it. Okay. All right, the next sort of breakdown and categorization of the AIW was recognizing 3 categories of influence. And these were broken up into direct, indirect, or unknown. And this is really where I think the original drafting team had the most struggle, and as well where we got most of the comments afterwards from folks too. So I'll just throw out for those that either cannot see the screen or at home and maybe are just listening. So the document references a direct influence when measurable changes to the condition of the resource are reasonably expected as a consequence of a concurrent implementing action. So in my mind, there is an association there with location and timing, right? The action has to happen in close time and space to the effect that you are expecting. Alternatively, the influence of an intervention is considered indirect when measurable changes to the condition of the resource are reasonably expected as a consequence of an implementing action that occurred distinctly at an earlier time. So again, that implies a level of separation, right? We're not necessarily defining what that separation is, but a separation geographically and temporally between the potential cause and effect. And then finally, the influence of an intervention would be considered unknown when changes to the condition of the resource cannot be reasonably attributed or reliably measured, right? And I think that's a key point. Those are different, but kind of lend themselves to the same categorization until we know better as a consequence of an implementing action. So I'll stop there. I guess I'll make one other note. So these definitions were sort of inspired a bit by regulatory work and NEPA. And so I actually wish Dr. Roth was here because she was one of the folks who helped pull this together and thought that would actually help some of our regulatory agencies better nest, these concepts into what they do. But obviously, I do think these are difficult, right? And at some point, this team has to draw lines. Again, that we don't have to necessarily keep them forever if we find there's an issue. But I'll open it up to comments or questions to any of that second paragraph on the screen.
I just wanted to say I did find it challenging to understand the direct versus indirect from a lot of different perspectives. We've got a lot of restoration projects that are occurring in the middle of the state. So is that geographic separation direct or indirect? Because it could be 100 miles inshore. But yet the whole point is to improve water quality and the quantity of fresh water that would be landing on the coral reefs at some point down the line. So the intent would be that it would be direct, but there's a huge geographic separation. So how do we separate direct versus indirect under these definitions?
Yeah. Do you want to take the first stab at how we've done that so far?
I'll take a stab at the idea that these are categories of influence, and I don't think they're always mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. So I think under some projects, you can have very direct influence of an outflow in the project that's in close proximity and temporally linked to measurable influence at the reef, and other aspects of that project that can be indirect in that they're influencing water quality or water availability in the overall success of the project. So I think we can get both of those that tie together in some. Okay. Is that fit your understanding as well, Wes?
I think so. When I was looking at this originally, and we'll go down to the chart later and actually see where some of these things, tentatively landed, pending everybody's review and concurrence. But like what I think is an interesting example, which had to be nested in this, is when we're doing like a coral reef restoration effort, right? We're not messing with water quality. We're not messing with flow. We're actually manipulating the biota. That is a direct, right, intervention with the biota. I would argue almost anything else that we're doing, right, with water is not necessarily a direct influence on the biota, unless somehow you were delivering,
That's accurate.
maybe you could deliver, propagules, somehow. But I mean, that's really, I think, stretching what we do right now. But so it's just, in my mind, it's something like that. And again, we can talk about how discrete we want those lines to be or how fuzzy we want those lines to be. And again, the chart sort of attributes one of these to each of the projects. So we'll get to that. I think the question is, are we roughly comfortable with these categories? And we can either accept these as they are and then argue project by project, or, again, we can open these back up. I will say, I brought this up in the last meeting. Is it important to us to distinguish between direct or indirect impacts?
So in the example that you gave, would you want a project to be broken up to two parts, one to be filtered through direct and one indirect? Or is it worth considering a fourth category that would be a combined direct and indirect?
I mean, not necessarily. Certainly, I think you could have components of a project that do one or the other. And I think for simplicity, we probably just lean into whatever is most prevalent right now. But again, that's the fun thing about this format, is it can just be right now. And we can adjust as we move forward responsibly. But
so this is Wade. I have a thought, just go either way, I suppose. If we bring this back to a regulatory framework, this was operate under direct and indirect have very specific meanings for like mitigation, you're impacting seagrasses or mangroves. Those are very specific definitions. So I would even posit that maybe we need to be careful about how we call parts of project direct or indirect because of what that could result in down the road. Not to say we shouldn't evaluate them for our purposes here, but just be mindful that when the Everglades restoration starts changing things, what those might be. So yeah, maybe we come down on the side of maybe we don't need to define which is which, unless it has some tangible outcome for us.
Good question. Are these direct, indirect, and unknown? Is this back to the figures or not necessarily?
Could it be? It can help us define, what we're looking at and what water quality parameters or biotic parameters, we're paying attention to with respect to any of these projects. Gil, you had a handle?
Well, not necessarily with the regulatory definition in mind, but conceptually, I think I agree with what Wade said. To me, there's a lot of unknowns, especially with coral ecosystems, in terms of what impacts them at what time and proximal versus distant impacts. And I don't know that splitting out direct and indirect is particularly useful. To me, it's almost like a expected to impact versus not expected to impact versus unknown at this point.
And Wes, you do have a hand up. Dave Whiting.
Dave, please.
Gil just hit on what I was going to mention, that there isn't a discussion of unanticipated, and if there was an influence from an activity that simply wasn't anticipated, it might be directly or indirectly influencing the reef. But if your monitoring system isn't designed to capture for that impact, you might not attribute it to it. So it was, again, that question of unanticipated.
So I want to tug on that thread just a little bit more and make sure that I understand and everybody else understands. So we're not talking about a nomenclature change of direct and indirect. We're talking about shifting the concept to not worrying about the difference between the two, but looking at expected just whether something is expected or not? Whether impacts are expected? Yeah.
Yeah, this is Gil. I think that's true. And to be clear, I think the definitions of the terms are right on. But I don't think we necessarily have the knowledge in hand to split out direct versus indirect, especially the delayed effects that are implied in the definition of indirect. I don't think we really know, especially for land-based stressors. We don't always know the fade and transport, dynamics that are accompanying those particular parameters. So it may be that in the future we can split those out, but my preference would be to avoid losing anything that's potentially important to consider, that we go to a really an impact, no impact, or unknown classification right now.
Okay, so that's definitely something we can take back and try to rewrite and bring back to everybody for further review. I'm going to keep going. Now, I think any other comments on that paragraph? Okay. Online? Good. Okay. Let's go down to the third one. And so this is bringing in the timeline aspects of this as well. And I'm going to go right off the bat and say I think that these periods are very arbitrary. And so if folks have better ideas for how to do that, I am all ears for it. I think the initial concept, at least on the less than 4 years, is that's a political cycle. So for a team of senior tied in leadership folks, like they're honestly, it is what it is, right? Something to think about. But honestly, beyond that time period, then, we really are on like project and program level scales. The next things to come, are much longer term, right? And thinking about. So does anybody have any comments on those categories? Is 3 a good number? Should there be more? Do you have issues with the actual, number of years? Does it matter?
When I was looking at them, I kind of, I guess, rounded and considered it more like now, soon, and later. and didn't really care about whether it was 4 years or 5 years or what have you. It was just what's going to be soon and what's going to be out in the future.
Yeah, and I would argue any of us who've been around Everglades restoration long enough know that something that's 4 years might be 2, might be 8, right? So
exactly.
That, again, these are just sort of gray areas for helping people understand kind of where to look next. And so perhaps we ditch the years altogether and go to just a qualitative like description. But there are potential drawbacks to that as well. What I will say again, this is iterative, and so what would absolutely make sense for this team to do going forward is to look at this chart on an annual or biannual basis and update it as such, right? So that we know what we're doing for the following year. But I'll open it up to any more comment on just that piece of it. Okay. All right. So we can sort of also look at that going forward in the final revisions of this. Let's focus real quick on the project list. I think this is pretty well taken from the last big discussion that we had. But obviously, if we modify those characterizations of influence, I think it'll be a little bit cleaner even than it is now. Basically, anything that says direct or indirect, that's going to be an anticipated or expected impact, right? And we can work on the language of that. So just as we go through project by project, just think about it that way. And then we're also part of what will allow us going forward to properly look at these things and understand, are we on a planning side or are we in the monitoring, adaptive management side of the equation, is looking at this initiation versus completion piece. So hopefully it's pretty evident that a check mark means that we've hit that, we've hit or passed that mark. So with the 2020 COP, right? Can you scroll down just a little bit more so we can see that other piece? There we go. The 2020 COP, we're proposing that all three of the modes of impact would have, that you would expect impacts via those modes. It has already, been initiated, and we're looking at a 4 to 10 year midterm, near-term time frame for completion. That everybody feel good about that? Okay, next one. We're just going to kind of roll through, and I'm going to stop asking if everybody's good with it. Just raise your hand, flag if you have an issue. And granted, these are not going to be all Everglades projects again. These are management activities. These are other perturbations in the system that are management-led, right? Or restoration-led. So the 2005 Florida Keys Water Quality Improvement Program, there would be no impact from QQTD, freshwater deliveries, but expecting impacts for nearshore coastal water quality and biological and ecological characteristics. Obviously, that has started. Does anybody know, would that be considered complete at this point in time, or an ongoing process?
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think they just added to it. I think we're supposed to hear more about that soon. So no, it's not done.
So I think I have that addition further down. And so we could also maybe talk about whether we want to separate those out discreetly or combine them. So keep that in mind. And so that maybe that also helps answer our question about whether one's done or not. C111 spreader canal, Western project is considered done. So that's not one maybe that we'll continue monitoring, but if we ever do some sort of look back across the data, if it may be something of interest to check on those expected impacts. Biscayne Bay coastal wetlands, again, all three modes of impact. And we are hopefully looking at less than 4 years to finish construction on that. Picayune Strand in the same boat as Biscayne Bay coastal wetlands. Indian River Lagoon South, also all three modes of impact, but a little longer out on. That's a larger project, a lot more pieces there. Mission Iconic Reefs, right, is one of those restoration programs. So, Sarah, if you figure out how to increase freshwater deliveries from planting corals, maybe we're really innovating something. But in the meantime, definitely have an impact on the biological and ecological characteristics. I think it's an open question about whether you get to a certain biomass of organisms that may have filtration potential or may help lower wave energy, that may influence water quality parameters. But I mean, there's also a level of, we're hoping to achieve that level of impact, I would think, certainly on the wave energy side. But whether, we actually can do that in a time scale, right, that we're all still here, unclear. So let's chew on that some more in the revisions. Ian.
Yeah, I would just say that we're currently as part of Project Fresca, we're currently modeling the impacts of local benthos alteration on biogeochemistry. So mostly the carbonate system. But we are, this can be not just, associated with outplanting corals, but also maybe potentially restoring seagrasses around Mission Iconic Reef sites. So we are evaluating this actively. Yeah, just letting you know.
So you would generally, Ian, concur with keeping it as a potential impact. Maybe that's how we.
Yeah, I think so. I think where you have it is fine. I just wanted to. It was more for everyone's awareness.
Yeah. No. Thanks, Ian. LOSUM, which the Corps tells us may be coming as early as August. We'll hopefully get a presentation on that in September. For the benefit of the northern section of our reef. So that's less than 4 years. Hey, that planning process is pretty much done.
Yep.
So maybe that's something else that we need to reflect actually is.
I would turn that into a check mark because we've essentially been operating under the LOSUM approach all year. So.
Okay, thank you. Florida's Coral Reef Restoration Recovery Initiative follows right along with the Mission Iconic Reefs, Biscayne Bay and Southeastern Everglades Restoration. That one is active in planning right now. I think that's actually one of the places where this team can be most valuable on the planning side. I think we're heading into what, the final rounding the corner here on that?
Right.
Okay.
So that you get the timeline, the stage right on it.
Okay. But one where we definitely want somebody on that PDT contributing the voice of the team. Central Everglades Planning Project, same. Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project, right? Same kind of boat there. Broward County Water Preserve areas. Work is one that's a little further inland and a little less certain right now. Having not been authorized yet, but we may be rounding that corner soon, depending on the direction we get from Congress. Southern Everglades Restoration is another one that's a little further back, even from where work is. We're awaiting the initiation of that feasibility study, hopefully in the next couple of years. Adam, what was that? 2026 or 2028? The course thinking?
Until January of 25.
January of 25. So that would be another one where we want to get somebody on the PDT, hopefully. And then there's that 2024 additional water quality improvements, I think, is tied in with the 2005 piece from Up Above Wade, if I'm not mistaken. So we can figure out where to go with that. So,
and I just looked it up, and it's all the same program as far as the Corps of Engineers is concerned. There was just additional allocations.
Okay.
Whether we separate or not doesn't seem to matter.
Okay. All right. So we can look at that. And that brings us to the end of the document. So I'll open it up for general comments, questions, direction on that. But I think we have some pretty clear marching orders to just touch up some of the language. Any other projects that were not considered that should be?
I was thinking, smaller scale, but they're doing a West Lake restoration for the mangroves and the flats, and it's active right now. I can get more information to you to add to the list.
This is Caitlin with Palm Beach County. I think when I looked at this list, I was having the same struggle of like, what's the scale? Like, what's the definition of a project that should be on this list? Because we have an array of inshore projects to build mangrove islands and restore seagrass habitat, but they're like 1 point, like, acres, and sometimes like 100, 300 acres.
I think West Lake is like 1,500.
Okay,
yeah.
so like, I don't know if it's projects that will require monitoring in a specific way or something. Are we trying to list projects where we could influence monitoring and like inject brief language, or is it just, you could argue that all of these affect water quality, offshore and inshore, but the indirect, direct conversation comes up when we're talking about how far they are from the inlet or something like that.
Right. Yeah, scales. Yeah.
We always got tons back to the Castle, right?
Yes.
And those restoration, things that are responsible. And they didn't stay away from local issues, right? Local government challenges, right? That you want to meet their really purview. So sometimes they might give, but I think generally speaking.
Yeah, no, I'm open to considering to talk about it and figure out where we want to draw that line. I definitely think that the collection of projects that are on here now are some of them might be smaller than others, but they are regional in nature. I mean, Biscayne Bay coastal wetlands, Loxahatchee River is actually probably the smallest one on this list that I can think of, and it's still storing water flow to a river that has significant contributions to the inshore reef. So, but nothing. I also want to say nothing stops the local governments from following the approach and having their sort of a local addendum to this, right, and to this framework that allows us to continue working together too. So, but let's keep talking about that.
I just wanted to make sure you weren't like hoping for those things. Like I waited out. I went back to Deb and said I think these are more regional in nature. Let's leave our stuff out. But if you wanted them,
at least to start with.
Okay, sounds good.
Something we've always pitched and spoken about with that drum was is to have presentations that work with FCRCT about those integration of local projects to restore the watershed that will complement restoration goals. So I think together to highlight those what the government's doing by
and I can say as a coordination team approach that coordination teams are a good hosting environment for doing that as well. So that you could do at the coordination team level requests, or offer the opportunity here on projects like that. So we could, as a team, kind of voting and membership level, think about whether that's the right type of information that we need to take back to the working group, or is that information that we hold and share with the coral reef restoration partners that the project. I'm not sure, but I think that would be a good format for it as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Yes, Gil.
This is Gil West. Sarah may be able to speak to this more, but in the last couple of years, we've gotten $15 million for artificial reef deployment in Monroe County. It's not really water quality, and I get that it's not really connected to South Florida ecosystem restoration, but there's a potential there through use of these artificial habitats to accelerate restoration or provide additional habitat for settlement of natural recruits. And if we're trying to capture everything comprehensively, we might want to add that to the mix. It won't affect water quality probably in a significant way, but it could affect the ecology of the reefs.
Yeah, I think
I'll just jump in if I may, Dr. Brooks. Yes, interesting you mentioned that, Gil, because I was thinking about it actually as well, because we have in our preliminary discussions about planning for projects using that $15 million in Monroe County, thought about how can we use this to benefit water quality? And that's not an easy question to answer in the context of, artificial structures. But it's definitely something we're actively considering, and we have a meeting August 5th to advance those projects. And I will once again, bring that subject up and mention, this group and these discussions in that context. So stay tuned. Hopefully we can find ways to have that $15 million provide broader benefits to the ecosystem. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will just say, I know there are discussions about finding ways to integrate the goals of that, artificial habitat program for Monroe County with the Florida's Coral Reef Restoration and Recovery Initiative. That also, meets the more stringent permitting requirements of the marine sanctuary, right? Which is another piece of the whole thing. And so, I do think there's some. I don't want to call them hurdles, but there's some things that have to get worked out. But that it would certainly, if those things can be dealt with and integrated appropriately, I think it would certainly, be something that might behoove us to include at some point. All right. I know we're drawing near towards time, so the other discussion that we do need to have is about the project delivery teams. And whether the group agrees that we want to try to get our FCRCT members assigned to those teams as FCRCT representatives. The other piece of that would be just, very short documentation for the group's edification and for those individuals chosen as formal representatives that define how they'll conduct engagement with the PDT on behalf of the FCRCT. And so I'll just stop there and see if anybody has any thoughts about how we engage that process. Gil.
I mean, this is Gil. I think it's a good suggestion. But some of these PDTs have been in operation for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And I doubt that I assume most folks on this group are more unfamiliar with that process. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that we need representatives on every one. So maybe probably not for today, but a more targeted discussion of what's highest priority to have members of this group connected to is in order.
I think honestly that flows directly from that chart that we just discussed, right? We would focus on those projects on that chart that are in planning or about to be, right? Because those are the only ones that really, I guess there is some PDT action after a project has been constructed as well, but that's probably less important for this group right off the bat. But there are fewer projects on that list than there are members in this team. And I think ideally, some folks are already engaged in those PDTs in a non-formal way, and we could simply formalize their participation. For me, I think it's both important that individual or individuals, we don't have to limit it to one, if more than one person would like to be engaged, but I think probably just one formal representative, I guess. They both in part speak for the team and our responsibility and ensuring thoughtful consideration of the project and its impacts on the resource, but also brings back to this team what's been discussed and any progress in between meetings with the PDT, right? And so that when we need to respond as a team, then they can go back as well.
Some of these I'm already involved in. The obviously the SEP one, they started with an ecosystem group, and I'm a part of that one. And they recently started up their water quality group, so I've been attending those. And so that would be something I could help with because I've been watching them and talking to them and being in the meeting, and of course LOSM. We're following LOSM, so that would make some sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that one's done for all of those purposes,
pretty
right?
much.
It'll whenever the next manual,
exactly
manual rewrite. So
we're always talking to the core, so they're helpful.
So in general, does everybody feel like that is an important niche for us to kind of carve out in this process? Okay. So what we'll do then is follow up with an email. We'll try to get some clear idea of where folks may already be engaged and who might like to just formalize that on behalf of the team. Noting Elizabeth Kelly as our SEP representative in waiting. And so we will do that. We'll sort of do it concurrently with addressing some of the edits on number 4, and then depending on how quickly that comes together, we'll either bring it to a virtual vote and let everybody know how that goes, or just bring it back up in September. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah, Cassandra.
How do you feel about people wearing multiple hats at a PDT? So, for example, I'm already been baked into several of them, but I'm representing district. So, how do you feel about 2 hats in the meeting?
And you is more broadly than just me.
Yes.
Use.
Y'all.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay. So this is Gil. Everybody's going to be interacting in their professional capacity. So
right, but I would be a partner. It's core and district are the lead agency partners as opposed to interested parties like FWC.
No, I understand. I would say if you're comfortable, certainly I'm comfortable. But I don't speak for the group.
And I think we can also feel it out, right? If they're as the non-federal sponsor, like you're saying, I mean, you have a different level of engagement. And so if we have other people that are willing and able to serve there, then I think maybe you're off the hook. Okay. So and I think we could all be pretty respectful of your and Dr. Ralph in particular, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking first.
But there may be other situations too, right, where somebody's already a formal member on behalf of a state or federal agency, and maybe it's best to not double hat somebody if we can avoid it.
And I would think there's one more situation, which is that there's team members here, myself, where in the case that I have a number of employees assigned to many of the teams that were listed in this right now that I'm already hearing from on the PDT and the sub-team levels, various groups. So in a way, there's a link through us to that. So it's almost, FCRCT by proxy. And I don't know what that means yet either. So again, I think there's a bit of a gray area here, but I think the more important takeaway is that at the working group, science coordination group level and development of the PDTs, we're getting them to include and recognize the coral reefs as part of the resources that we're working to protect and do good things for. So I think it's important as the person doing the action, but I think it's also important as a symbol and as a talking and touch point for the importance of this resource in those environments upstream. So, want to be careful.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing I would just say, again, respectful of everyone's time, is, I don't think we need to get down to the sub-team level right now at all. So we'll keep it high level. Obviously, folks are welcome to pursue that if they want to, or if it's what they need to do, and we can discuss case by case basis. Also, right, there may be particular projects where we do want to do that or not, but we can flesh that out going forward. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns regarding all of our discussions on CAP 4? Heather?
How set, I'm sorry, Heather, how set is the watch list? Like, if projects are coming up over time, are we adding projects to the watch list, or is this like a set, these are the only projects?
I very much think so, and I think at some point we will set in on a schedule, either annual or by every 2 years, depending on the pace of how things are going.
And the changes on the IDS. Right. So the integrated delivery schedule maps the whole program for us in a way, and it has its own incremental time steps. So in a way, we'll have to stay alive. And with that,
that's right. It will shift the planning cycles. We'll have this on a year-to-year basis. Yeah.
So when that gets an update, we'll have to at least at a leadership level or at a group level, at least look at it to see if it's time to make some adjustments. Right now. So that'll force that's at least one time step we know before spending that outside to get to the house.
And then one
so annually at a minimum, and then some.
Okay. Seeing no other comments there, Sarah, thank you. I saw that you had to go. Appreciate your time. Let's go to public comment. Alan, would you mind, or Marcia?
No, I will be calling on everyone. So members of the public, if you'd like to make public comment, we will be bringing a timer up on screen. As you raise hands, we'll be calling on you one by one, and we will unmute your microphones. We'll give everyone a minute to see if they want to raise their hands. I'm not seeing any hands at this moment.
Okay, great. Alan, let me know if somebody raises a hand while we're closing out, and we can jump back for them. But in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for the robust discussion. I think we have a lot of things coming to a head, and the September meeting should be very productive and set us on a good course to also be able to inform the task force in October of our progress. For those of you not counting, this group has been in effect for what, almost 2 years? Almost. We're nearing. It doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like we're still pretty fresh, but I think we're covering a lot of ground, and definitely appreciate folks keeping pace and trying to get as much of this down on paper as possible, so it can help inform where we go from here. So, Co-Chair, Vice Chair, any additional comments?
Just that I do want to give kudos to the Coral community as a whole for being so willing to jump in and engage on the water quality side. We needed to do that. It's a remarkably large project that can become complicated, hard to track, disconnected from the endpoints that we're trying to reach, stuck in bureaucratic challenges between the agencies, all of us wearing our individual hats, and to see kind of this full level of engagement that implies something interesting about what's been happening. And this goes back to Sam and Maurizio and others back to SCTLD response. There is a degree of belief or faith in this process that it's worth the time to engage and help us do this. So I want to just put out the thank you on that aspect of it. I hope that if we keep the momentum going as we're doing and things seem to keep skating along as quick as they are, that we will prove and provide that feedback and that two-way communication that it has indeed been worth this level of engagement and connection. So I take that time commitment very seriously, and I really appreciate it.
And Executive Director Gelber, would you like to provide anything else?
Looking down at the rain falling out over the glacier.
Water is coming.
Hopefully that's
water. It's good,
yeah.
Right? And,
as long as it stays over there, and Jennifer Corrado would
depending on where it falls. That's right. So when West brought to our attention at task force level, this whole group a couple years ago, 12 before the group came together, I was like, so it's hard to affect, change the mangrove fringe. I see it coming together, Doc. I see it coming together. I see when this is going, and it has a large ability to affect change. And I encourage you all to remain engaged if you're representing others. And I see this app that benefits and the reasons why, because I have my head underwater, so not as much as you all, more, but I get it underwater occasionally out there. So really great stuff you all are doing in the time I believe is worthwhile. Other things, next week, Broward County is been a great host with us over the Long Key National Area is the Working Group FCRCT meeting next week. And then also a lot of this discussion tied to the IDS. The Corps should begin hosting their listening only workshops and then work towards that final presentation of the 2024 IDS task force as well. So that's right. And again, any folks here at the table that when they look at these projects, what does Southern Everglades represent, or what these projects mean, combined operations plan, this is not your deal. Call Jose. No, seriously, CORI is here to help you work with the West, participating to help with some of that data, because that's not going to be something that all of you deal with all the time in our office here for your systems.
Thank you. And so as Executive Director Gelber just mentioned, the next Working Group Science Coordination Group meeting is on Tuesday. The following meeting will be September 25th, tentatively planned at South Florida Water Management District headquarters. And Cassandra is very pleased about that. She walked down from her office. So again, we will be looking at the 24th, 25th, or 26th for our next meeting there in Palm Beach as well. So be prepared for that. And then task force meeting is set, right, for October 24th in Washington, D.C.
I got double, triple check that, right? But, yeah.
So hold October 24th. Those of you who are more on the coral side who haven't really engaged the task force, that's an opportunity to come up to the federal level and see what's going on there, either in person or virtually. And I think that this team will have some great product to finally be able to put forward before the task force. So excited about that. And then one final thank you to the OERI team. Again, no, this is not easy. We thank you for putting up with us and traveling around the state with us. You know, maybe we can reward you with an in-person Key West meeting. But with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.